You know, I do like fish.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, Beth Dowdy.
And we'll get started by asking our vice chair to read the ordinance, please.
Thank you,
Mr. Chair, if I could, just before that, I've got a number that will want to identify a member here or
Okay.
someone calling in. If someone with the last four digits 2504, if you could tell me who you are.
That's me. It's Reba Mueller, Town Manager, Clifton Forge.
All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Phil, I think it's all yours, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to the City of Roanoke Emergency Ordinance adopted by the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission on April 23rd, 2020, and the 2020 Virginia General Assembly Legislation H29 enacted April 24th, 2020, the May meeting of the the September meeting of the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission is being held virtually on this day, Thursday, September 24th, 2020 at 3 p.m. via Zoom. Under the current state of emergency and until further notice, it has been deemed unsafe to assemble a quorum at a public body in one place. Any members of the public may view and participate in the meeting through electronic means. Meeting details are listed on the second page of the agenda. All materials made available to the members will be made available to the public at the same time by posting on the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission website. This meeting is being recorded as always, and due to the virtual nature, video and audio will be recorded and provided on the website in place of written minutes. When the state of emergency ends, draft minutes from all of the meetings held during this time will be ratified at the next in-person meeting. As a way of ensuring that our meeting goes smoothly, Brian Hill, Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission Regional Planner, and Tim Poland Thomas, Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission Outreach and Communications Specialist, will serve as a host and co-host for this meeting. All participants are asked to mute themselves to improve audio quality. If any voting commission member wishes to make a motion, second it, or comment on a motion, please unmute yourself and ask to be recognized by the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And next, I guess we should have the roll call, please.
Ms. Cox, Mr. Lanford, Ms. Bannersdall,
Yes.
Mr. Clinton,
Here.
Ms. Henderson, Mr. LaRue, Mr. Martin,
Here, sir.
Mr. Collins, Mr. Spence, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Carter, Ms. Smith, Mr. Whitlow, I think Mr. Whitlow, I think he's on.
I'm
Mr.
here,
O'Donnell?
yes.
Mr. Hutchins, Mr. Dean Martin, Mr. Radford,
Here.
Mr. North,
Here.
Mr. Osborne,
Here.
Lee Osborne,
Here.
Ms. Onitis, Mr. Tucker,
Here.
Mr. Bestpitch,
Here.
Dr. Downey,
Here.
Mr. Cobb,
Here.
Mr. Guzzler,
Here.
Mr. Volozin,
Here.
Mr. Wallace, Mr. Saunders,
Here. Wallace is here.
Mr. Payne, Miss Payne, I'm sorry, Linda Payne, Miss Marshall, Ms. Mueller,
Here.
Mr. Irvin,
Here.
Mr. Newbill, Mr. Gross,
Here.
Mr. Peters.
I am here, thanks.
We have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, sir. We certainly appreciate everyone's attendance today. Next item is the consent agenda. this afternoon. It contains the approval of the agenda, the minutes from the June meeting, and of course the financial report, along with the endorsements of smart scale applications. Are there any questions or additions? Hearing none, we will entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Wayne, I guess we need to call a roll, please.
Yes, sir. Ms. Dahl,
Yes.
Mr. Clinton,
Yes.
Mr. Billy Martin,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whitlow,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mr. North,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
okay. Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Yes.
Dr. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Cobb,
Yes.
Mr. Gessler,
Yes.
Mr. Velosan,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Saunders,
Yes.
Ms. Moeller,
Yes.
Mr. Irvin,
Yes.
Mr. Gross,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, folks. Thank you, Wayne. Under Chairman's remarks this afternoon, just one brief item. As most of you know, during the summer of each year, the staff begins to prepare for the Commission's annual meeting in October. However, and you knew this was coming, right? This year's different from previous years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So this year, well, of course, as you folks know, we just celebrated last year 50 years, and it was a great time. You know, we had a wonderful dinner and really good entertainment. But unfortunately, this year that cannot happen. So because of the concerns of spreading the viruses, we will not have the dinner. Of course, we will continue with the meeting, and it will be held virtually. And we will celebrate 51 years this year. And of course, we'll all look forward to getting together next year when we can celebrate 52 years. I guess everyone will have to fix their own favorite meal or whatever to go along with our virtual meeting this year. But that's just another victim of our unfortunate circumstance at this time. And with that, we'll move on to the Executive Director's report. If you would, please, Mr. Strickland.
Mr. Chairman, I really didn't have a formal report. I just wanted to thank Beth for joining us. I thought it'd be a great idea to have her here one more time before she heads off into greener pastures to talk to us about a bit about what the partnership is doing now. And I know, as you said, Mr. Chair, we're going to miss Beth and give her best wishes for her future activities, whatever they may be.
Absolutely. I think we'll all miss Beth, but hopefully, as she said before the meeting, she's not going to disappear completely. So we look forward to seeing her around town. So I guess the next item is the presentation of the audit report. Is Mr. Stone here?
I'm here. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna try to share my screen and go over my handout. Hopefully that'll work for us.
Okay.
Okay. Hopefully you guys can see my screen. Basically, I can't tell if you can see it or not, so somebody can give me okay, great. So you see some summary financial information there, and kind of while you're looking over that, I'll let you know, first off, that the audit went extremely well, and you did receive what we call an unqualified opinion or unmodified opinion. You can't do any better than that. And you also had a clean government auditing standards report as well. So we didn't identify any internal control issues or compliance issues with the commission. So you get a clean bill of health. In fact, we just had a few journal entries, which is always kind of nice for us. I can tell you, I think we had 3 journal entries, and one of those was just a reclassification. So really just two journal entries, and that's almost unheard of. So your staff's really doing a good job for you. I'll kind of go over your financial statements very quickly here. You can see at the top, on the top row for 2020, you ended the year with about $1.2 million in current assets, and that's primarily going to be cash, accounts receivables, and grants receivable at the end of the year. So stuff that's going to be turned into cash very quickly, as well as any cash on hand. Your non-current assets are going to be your prepaid items, so prepaid insurance and that sort of thing, and then your capital assets. And that ended the year at $245,000. And really the reason we have a decrease going back from 2017, 2018 is you had a lot of prepaids related to the rideshare program with Zaxter, I think was the name of the company. You had some prepaid expenses there. As you work your way on down, you can see current liabilities into the year at $137,000, long-term liabilities at $53,000, and those are primarily going to be your accrued leave balances. So compensated absences when you pay people out upon retirement for any leave that they have. Those are considered long-term liabilities. When you work your way further down the page, you can see the blue line. That's the one to pay attention to. The unrestricted and designated net position. You can see you ended up for the year at $987,000 as compared to $966,000 in the prior year. And overall, your net position increased by about $9,700. So you ended the year in pretty good shape. Certainly have adequate reserves for an organization of this size on hand. And you can see how they've kind of been growing over the past several years. And that's generally the trend we like to see as accountants. The last thing I show you down at the bottom is just how to take your financial statements from the modified accrual or modified cash basis of accounting back to the full accrual of the change in net position. So on a modified cash basis, your income for the year was $28,700. When we subtract depreciation expense for the year and we subtract the increase in your accrued leave balances, you get back to your change in net position, which was $9,713. But overall, like I said, the audit went very well. We were pretty pleased with what we saw. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions about the financial data that I've got up on the screen.
Okay. Any questions, folks? Nope. Good. Good.
The only other thing, and I think you should have all gotten a copy, of course, of the audit report, probably by mail. We also, what goes along with that is something called our letter to those charged with governance. And it's about a 2-page letter that just goes over the key estimates in the financial statements. If we had any problems with the audit, this is where we would disclose those. You guys get the boilerplate letter. Like I said earlier, your staff really does a good job for you. I can't remember the last time we had an audit with only 3 journal entries. They don't come along that often, but your staff's doing a great job, and the records of the organization are in very good order. So, and I'll stop there and try to answer any questions that anybody has.
Okay, thank you, Corbin. Folks, do you have any questions at all for Corbin?
That's great to hear. You know, Corbin, your firm always does a great job on the audits. And we've talked about this before. We really appreciate what you guys do and your thoroughness and even your compliments. We appreciate that.
Corbin, does that mean the cost of the audit should go down next year?
It probably should, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's always a good question. It was already pretty low, though. So how about if it just doesn't go up?
Okay.
Hey, you're talking to an accountant there. Good. Now, those obviously that's a great report, and certainly great comments. And as you mentioned, a lot of work goes into that all year long. We end up with one report, but actually it takes work all year long. So very proud of the job that our staff does too.
Yeah, really, there is a lot of work that goes into it, and you realize that when you're doing the audit, and of course, if you're dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. But there is a lot of work that goes into it. So
You bet. Yeah. And we certainly appreciate your hard work. And with that, if there are no questions, we will entertain a motion to accept the audit as presented.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we accept the fiscal year 20 audit report.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'm glad to second.
All right.
It doesn't matter that you got both from Roanoke County.
I think we can live with that.
All right.
All right. So, Wayne, I guess we need to call the roll yet again. Please.
You're muted, Wayne.
Yes.
I can hear you.
I just leave it and make all kinds of sounds. Senator Dahl? Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Clinton?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whitlow?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Bestpitch?
Yes.
Dr. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Cobb? Mr. Cobb? Mr. Velozin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Saunders?
Yes.
Mr. Mueller? I'm sorry, Ms. Mueller?
Yes.
Mr. Irvin?
Yes.
Mr. Gross?
Yes.
And Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Motion passes. Mr.
All
Chairman.
right. Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to our very good friend, Beth Dowdy. I think she's got some information about the regional partnership. Beth, always good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to have this opportunity to kind of update it, everyone. So my presentation is kind of the Roanoke Regional Partnership in the age of COVID, to explain what's going on, because we're still, very active and very busy as much as, we can, weaving around the obstacles that are presented to us. But I'll go ahead and share my screen here, and we can talk about what's going on, okay?
Okay.
So, I know there are some people who I don't know on the call. So I'll just give you a little bit of a summary. So the Roanoke Regional Partnership has been around for 37 years. We're the regional economic development marketing organization for the region. Over 37 years, we've gotten involved in other things that give us a more holistic approach to regional economic development. Our area of that we represent is similar to the footprint. It is almost exactly like the footprint of the Regional Commission: Alleghany, Botetourt, Franklin, and Roanoke counties, cities of Covington, Roanoke, and Salem, and the town of Vinton. We're a public-private partnership, so half of our money comes from those 8 governments, and the other half comes from the business community, and they support our program of work, which basically falls into several different buckets. There's the traditional business attraction, which we've been doing for 37 years. Things that are newer to our program: asset development. You probably know that better as Roanoke Outside, which has taken our outdoor assets and developed them over the last 11 years into an economic sector and a livability asset. Talent attraction, which is attracting the talent. I always say talent is the currency of the 21st century, and we need to be able to have that currency to pay our bills here by attracting people to work in our businesses and support our quality of life. Market intelligence, we're a data source through our organization. For example, we do the quarterly cost of living study that everyone references. And then lately we've been involved in product development through the Western Virginia Regional Industrial Facility Authority. Authority. So that's kind of the platform that we're going to launch off of, going through what's going on. So, you know, when COVID hit, over the last several years, we've transitioned to adding kind of revenue generating events and activities that supplement our public and private funding and enable us to do more. And so when COVID hit, here's 6 things that we had in our budget as revenue producers that went away. The Blue Ridge Marathon, the Down by Downtown Music Festival, our Experience 2020, which is our annual talent summit for young professionals, and then some other educational events for human resource professionals. So we started out kind of in a hole, but we've been able to really accelerate our programming to be able to respond to these circumstances. So the first thing we did was created a regional resource webpage that had all the resources related to COVID and economic recovery. We've had tens of thousands of visits to that page. We designed a business survey that went out to all our businesses. We did social media, we did a postcard mailing, and then that generated leads of businesses who needed assistance. And then we were able to hand that off to our local governments. We've continued to research economic impacts and supply them to our local governments. Just did another report this week. And we've tried to do a lot of communication with not only with the business community, but also with our partners. So our local economic development departments, we started as a weekly, then a bi-weekly, and now a monthly call with that group. So everybody's kind of in the loop, and the regional cooperation that I witnessed is really strong. So I'm very pleased that, you know, out of crisis comes opportunity, and that's a very positive thing that's come out of that. And we've also partnered with the Small Business Development Center and others to really create a network for recovery. We received a Go Virginia grant that is going to focus, I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then we also held an Opportunity Zone webinar. Many of our localities have Opportunity Zones. We were going to have an in-person event before COVID, and we pivoted and did the first in the state as a webinar, and now other regions and communities are following us on that. But so we tried to take advantage of any opportunity that we have. So I'll talk about business investment. We started the year off great with 2 big announcements: the Mack Trucks announcement in Roanoke County and Traditional Medicinals in Franklin County. We've since had a couple of expansions as well in Franklin County and the city of Roanoke, and a couple of small entrepreneurial projects in the outdoor sector that we've worked on as well that are kind of just starting to get off the ground. So, you know, the year started very well, but then everything kind of came to a halt. We've had some visits. We have one next week with a site consultant, but things certainly are slower than they have been. So we've adapted. We've developed virtual site visit tools. We've been the leader with the state to develop a package of virtual tools so you can do these site visits without actually being person to person. We've done virtual engagement with our site consultants and with other gatekeepers such as Virginia Economic Development Partnership and others. We've also started 3 different campaigns. One is an small metro IT initiative. We've partnered with the state. They're focusing on 3 smaller metros to help attract IT companies. We're doing an outdoor industry campaign and a food and beverage campaign. So we continue, you know, to market. So, you know, that's the theory. In downtimes, you don't stop what you're doing. You do as much, if not more. Then we've also been working on the Woodhaven Technology Park. This is a project of the Western Virginia Regional Industrial Facility Authority. There are 6 governments in the authority. 3 of them are involved in this project. It's about 120 acres in North Roanoke County at the corner of 81 and 581. It's owned jointly by Roanoke County, Roanoke City, and the City of Salem. So since purchasing the property just a couple of years ago, we've had it rezoned, we've demolished structures, we extended the utilities, we've done our marketing packages and renderings, and as of about a month ago, we finished the entrance road, Innovation Drive. So the next 6 months, we're going to be doing the landscaping and the signage. We're going to get the grading plans permitted. We're going to initiate clearing in that blue area, which is heavily wooded, and we'll be doing a little bit more demolition of another structure that we purchased. And so then within 12 months, we'll have completed a 20-acre pad, and so the state has a tiered program of site readiness. We took this site from a 2 to a 4, and when this grading is completed, we'll be tier 5, which is the highest level of readiness in the state system. We're already seeing activity on this property, even when it's not finished. You know, the rule in economic development sites, you know, nowadays in the 21st century is they have to be ready. They have to be ready to go. No one's going to wait on you to build a road or grade a site or whatever. So we're getting there, but we've already seen some preliminary interest from probably about 3 or 4 different projects. So I'm very optimistic about the potential for this property. So talent, as I said, is very important to us. We did a summer program. Last summer 2019, we did an in-person internship program where we had about 50 students who were interns at local businesses. We did in-person events for them. You know, when you're doing an internship, it is the company's job to occupy you from 8 to 5. This program is to occupy you after that. So at the end of your internship, you don't say, well, I didn't meet anybody. I didn't learn anything about the community. I don't have really a reason, you know, to stay here. I don't have a good rounded view of the community. Well, we knew we couldn't do that this year because of the in-person part of it. So we went online. We had 150 students who signed up for this online program, 9 weeks of professional development and networking. It was wildly successful, and so successful that we're going to do another program in January for kind of the, you know, in between terms. And that's because the students asked us to do it, and their friends all found out what they were doing and they wanted to enroll. So kind of excited. And what that does is it creates connections between our region and the future workforce. The Go Virginia project is called the Recovery and Resiliency Project, where we're looking, there's a lot of talk about small business, and rightfully so, but there's less talk and less attention paid because we don't notice their hair is on fire to the traded sector. So the businesses that are in advanced manufacturing, in life science, in technology, we're going to focus on those sectors and make sure we understand what the challenges are for those sectors, and then use that information to form a plan for moving forward to support them, to support their growth and support the prosperity of the region. So we're really excited about that. And there's a lot of enthusiasm around this by the companies and by our local economic development department. So we formed a coalition that is involved in this, of our local economic development partners, as well as other agencies and organizations. And everybody's really excited about it. So we'll see what comes out of this. The other thing we've done during COVID is a remote worker campaign. So it's called Live Here, Work Anywhere. And it targets professionals in large cities and encourages them, if you can work anywhere, why not work from here? And we've had really phenomenal results. You know, the secret was focusing on large metros with big COVID problems. And so we've had 2.8 million impressions, 61,000 clicks. And the best part is we've collected 1,500 names. Now, you all know that we have a population growth issue. It is slow, sluggish, and in a couple of cases on the negative side. This is designed to address that, and in a small way, but it doesn't cost us very much to do this. It's really, it's cost us less than $5,000. So on a per name collected basis, it's pretty good. So we're continuing to do this, and anecdotally, there is evidence that this is working. We also have, an annual conference for young professionals. We canceled it last year. We're going to try to see come June whether we can run this or not. And our experience with that summer internship program, I think we've learned if we can't do it in person, we are confident we can do it virtually. But we do continue to have some. We have these two programs that go year round: Experience Leadership and Experience Outdoors. Experience Outdoors gets people together and they go kayaking, they go bike riding, they go all over the region and go hiking, exposed to the region in outdoor activities. And we're continuing to do that under a very controlled environment. A couple weeks ago, they went kayaking and stand-up paddle boarding at Carvin's Cove. And we do virtual professional development events. We had one last week on finances. So, and then it's going to be a little hard to get on college campuses this year, which we also try to do all the time. So we advertise on college campuses. We work with the career offices on the college campus. We'll do fewer, if any, in-person events on the college campuses, but we're continuing that pipeline and continuing to communicate through that so that, again, we can engage these students for a future in our region. So asset development is, as I said, around Roanoke Outside. There's been a huge increase during COVID in outdoor usage, and we're really kind of capitalizing on this opportunity. This is actually taking lemons and making lemonade out of it, because we've launched Project Outside, which many of you may have seen. Project Outside is a campaign to raise $100,000 to support our outdoor assets. We've had to cancel GoFest. That's not true. We're reimagining GoFest, but it won't be the same. It won't be 40,000 people and demonstrations and frisbee dogs and people upside down on bikes and that kind of thing. But we talked every sponsor into letting us keep the money and putting it into this Project Outside fund. And this fund, we're at about $75,000 now. And when we get to 100, we're using this money to support our outdoor assets for delayed maintenance, for programs. And it's kind of great mad money to be able to make these assets everything they can be. Outdoor usage went up 200%. The maintenance budgets didn't go up 200%. So there really is a gap that we can fill here. We did during COVID every platform from our talent platform, Get to Know Noke, to Roanoke Outside, and as I mentioned, our Roanoke Region Response page, all were COVID conscious to make sure that we were sharing the message. We've worked with our small businesses in the outdoor arena to make sure that they're getting what they need. They're getting the support. For example, the great programs that the local governments have initiated with support for small business. We make sure they're aware of it, and then, as I said, we've actually even been able to help a couple new businesses get started, 2 or 3. So that's great. So our events, are totally screwed, honestly. But so Go Cross is our cyclocross event. We're gonna put on something certainly not at the level where it was an internationally sanctioned race. We're gonna do something. Go Fest has been reimagined with individual activities like paddling at Wade Park on that weekend, and a benefit concert in party pods, where you buy an area like a 12 by 12 square, and you bring your friends, a limited number of friends, and you're allowed to stay in that pod and enjoy a musical act. That's a 2-day event, and the proceeds will go to Project Outside. It's too early to make a decision on the Blue Ridge Marathon. We'll see what happens. The Blue Ridge Marathon, really, we could have taken a bigger hit than we did. A lot of people ran it virtually, which if you've seen the news with the drumstick dash and the Salem half marathon, that's the new way to run a race. So we got their revenue. A lot of people postponed their registration for a year, and a lot of people just gave us the money. So it could have been a lot worse, and it could have been a lot better. So that's how we've adapted during, the age of COVID. But as you can see, we're still very active and moving ahead. And they're frightening times and exciting times at the same time, to be honest. So.
Yeah. All right. Beth, what a great report. Really a lot of exciting things still going on in the Roanoke region. And as always, regional partnership is right in the middle of everything, generating a lot of activity and a lot of excitement. So thank you and the partnership for continuing to work hard. It's great.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. And thank you to the public and private sector for the support that enables us to do this, and to my board that gives us has the confidence in us to know what we're doing.
Great. Well, thanks again, Beth.
So, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd just like to comment on behalf of Roanoke County that I personally have enjoyed all of the interactions with the regional chamber and Beth's presentations and coffees and whatnot. They've been enlightening, and they've kept me informed of what's going on in the area. And I just can't say enough about the regional efforts that she's led, and we're going to miss her, but I'm sure someone is coming along that will fill her shoes. And I do hope that they can get up and running and be as effective as she has, if not greater, going forward. So thank you for a job well done, Beth.
Thank you very much for those kind words.
I think we can all echo that statement. And he mentioned someone filling your shoes. It's big shoes to fill. You've done a great job. We appreciate you so much, Beth.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the Interstate 81 lighting, intersection lighting information. And is Christine or Rachel going to present that this afternoon?
Yes, hi, Chairman Gross. This is Christina Finch, and I'll start off the presentation.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Before you is the consideration of a resolution to request that lighting be added to interchanges along Interstate 81. Lighting is not currently included in any of the VDOT projects that are ongoing right now to widen I-81. It's not a component of it. As you know, in the last few years, there's been a big effort around I-81. There was a corridor improvement plan that was done by VDOT. And actually, nighttime crashes did not stand out in that data that was reviewed during the planning process. And lighting was not brought up by citizens as a main area of concern. So just a reflection on that effort. However, since then, the idea to add lighting to Interstate 81 has been initiated by Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge on the belief that having more lighting in the Roanoke Valley along the interstate will draw more people to patron Roanoke Valley businesses. So we had a resolution first brought to you at the beginning of the year. It's been passed on from meeting to meeting a few times as public input was discussed at the Roanoke Valley Transportation Planning Organization and some of the merits of the projects. And then back in June, Mr. Ken King from VDOT gave a presentation to the commission that talked about some of the evaluation criteria. He showed some images about where lighting existed and where it could be added around the interchanges. And then he also shared some information about the capital costs. It was about $12 million to add lighting to the 6 interchanges in the Roanoke Valley, as well as ongoing operations costs. So at the RVTPO meeting back in June, it was requested that the staff of the commission solicit some public input to get citizens' perspective on their feelings on lighting, adding lighting, which we did, and we received a really phenomenal response to the survey that was put out there. I want to mention before I hand it over to Rachel to share a little bit more about that citizen input, that the resolution that is before you today has been modified from the one shared with you in previous months. It's been modified to add more direct request. So if approved today, it would be actually requesting that VDOT add more lighting to the interchanges. So I will pass it over to Rachel now to share with you about the public input.
Thank you. As Christina said, we were really taken aback by the amount of response. It turns out that any survey that has I-81 in the title is very popular, and we don't really need to do much to promote it. It promotes itself. WSLS picked it up, and we just really got a lot of responses. 678 people took the survey. The overall, they supported adding lighting to these projects. Typically, when you ask people, do you support, is this project a good investment? We typically expect somewhere around 70 to 80% will say yes, and that's exactly what we saw here. The comments were kind of interesting. I split the comments out. In the comment box, we allow people to ask people to comment on this proposed lighting or to suggest other projects they might be interested in. And so I split it out between comments that were related to the topic of the survey and comments that on other things. So the comments related to the survey, the most frequent comment had to do with light pollution. And those concerns came from both people who wanted to see the lighting as well as people who didn't. So some people said, yes, we want lighting, but we are concerned about light pollution. So be sure you look at that. Be sure to consider that. So that is a concern people have. There's a lot of comments. And they're very interesting to read through. We also included the Facebook comments. We were able to download those, export those from Facebook so that we could include those here. And it was sort of interesting, the different tone that people have when they're making a comment on Facebook versus when they're taking the survey. And of course, we don't know if the people who commented on Facebook also took the survey or just commented. We suspect maybe not, because one of the comments was, hey, everybody, there's more information at the survey. So at least it had the appearance that not everybody had bothered to take the survey, that they just commented. So if you have any questions about the results, please let us know.
Okay, thank you very much. A lot of great information and very interesting results from the survey, I think. So, commissioners, do you have any questions, comments? All right, if not, we'll move on to the resolution. You have before you a resolution in support of the Interstate 81 lighting at major intersections in Virginia's Blue Ridge. Is there a motion for adoption?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make that motion, but before I do so, I'd like to point out that in the earlier meeting today with the Transportation Planning Organization, we passed the resolution, but we did so with one minor change in the second to last paragraph. And that involved some wordsmithing. It reads today, should be designed in such a way to not impact adjacent residential areas. And we would like to propose that it read, the lighting should be designed in such a way not to negatively impact adjacent residential areas. And so with that change, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the resolution.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, then your motion would include those changes as you mentioned.
Yes, sir.
All right. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, Mr. Wayne, if you would please call a roll.
Ms. Manisdall,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whitlow.
Yeah.
I'm missing some folks here. Hold on a second. I'm missing a few folks. All right, sorry. Got a list here. I miss Mr. Clinton.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mr. North,
Yes.
Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bestfitch,
Yes.
Dr. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Cobb, Mr. Cobb, Mr. Velozen,
Yes.
Mr. Gessler.
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Saunders, Mr. Saunders, Ms. Mueller,
Yes.
Mr. Irvin,
Yes.
Mr. Gross,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Motion's approved, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, sir. And thank you,
Chairman,
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say thank you to the commission for your support to put a little light on Virginia's Blue Ridge.
Well, thank you. That was quite a graphic explanation there. So thank you very much for that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring that motion back up and to deny it based on that picture of the gentleman with the hat with the light bulb on. I just want to know if that light bulb works.
I'll second that.
Oh, it's frightening what the little bit of lighting on the subject may do, you know.
There's no question if he had brought it up before the vote, it would have failed.
Oh, something to be said for perfect timing, right?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Landon.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm not sure that Amanda can follow that, but we'll give it a try with some information about the rural bikeway plan. Please, Amanda.
I will try my best, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Just a second. Can you guys see that? Actually, you probably can't.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Okay, great. So, thank you all this afternoon for being here. This is a presentation on the 2020 update of the Rural Bikeway Plan. And this has been in the works for a couple of years, so I'm excited to bring it to you today. For those who aren't familiar with the Rural Bikeway Plan or may not have seen me present on it before or seen it before, this covers Alleghany County, Botetourt County, Craig County, and Roanoke County, the parts of Roanoke County and Botetourt County that are outside of the MPO, I should clarify. The first steering committee for this effort was held in the fall of 2018, and we did surveys and outreach over 2019, and we did in-person public input in January of this year. Luckily, we got that done before the pandemic hit, and then we did the drafting over the course of winter and spring of this year. So now we're here. So the public input, we did, I think I mentioned that we did in-person public input. We did 3 separate public input meetings, and the activities for those meetings were created using responses from the steering committee, but also responses from a previous survey that we had sent out to bicycle shop owners and to economic development folks. So we talked to Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge and Roanoke Outside, and so we got a lot of great feedback from them about what they thought was the importance of cycling to our region, and also what they thought attracted cyclists to our region. And then we plugged that into some activities at the public input meetings. We had 3 of those. We had one in Clifton Forge, one Just the Right Gear, and one which is in Roanoke County, and one at Downshift in downtown Roanoke, because we know a lot of cyclists in our area come from the urban area and go out into our rural area and come back. So we had some good turnout there. I think we had a pretty decent turnout, and we got some really great responses from folks. So what we heard from people at these meetings was that there were three main concerns that came up, and we called these in the plan, we called these our goals of things we wanted to address, right? So the big concerns, this probably won't surprise you if you've worked on bicycle or greenway or outdoor conversations in the past. Not that this particular plan was to do with greenways, but one of the big things that we heard then was about connections, and that came up again here in the rural bikeway plan. The big thing that we heard from people is we wanted to make connections between, especially between our more densely populated areas. So our rural multimodal centers, our urban centers, and our more rural areas. So people wanted to be able to get on a bike in downtown Roanoke and make it all the way out to Botetourt and come back, or they wanted to be able to start in Clifton Forge and bike out and come back, and do it safely. And that's that can be an issue for cyclists because there's so much traffic on our main thoroughfares that connect these areas. We also heard, again, kind of linking into that, we heard that people really wanted safe routes. So they didn't always feel safe on some of the routes that they would like to be on, and they wanted to see some safety improvements. And later on, I'm going to talk about some of the recommendations that we made in that regard. And then we also heard both from the economic development folks and from the cyclists that people were very interested in what kind of attractions there were on the routes that in question. And they wanted to be able to get to places like the Daleville Town Center and go to a concert and then bike home. Or, and they wanted wayfinding signage to be able to show them how to get there, right? So that was a big issue that came up, and Landon's giving me a thumbs up. So we came up with some general strategies and projects that we could pursue with regional partners or through the regional commission itself. And those were organized along the 5 E's, which is a framework that is used in a lot of bicycle planning. So the first one is engineering. So providing safety improvements on paved roads. Preserving gravel roads was a big thing we heard from people. They like to be able to do these gravel rides. That's become a very popular thing for cyclists. And then placing wayfinding signage in key areas. From education, we heard, we came up with a strategy to partner with Ride Solutions. We have an existing organization that is doing bicycle related events, and marketing alternative transportation. So we thought it would be a great idea to partner with them to do some of that work and kind of expand it a little bit more into the rural areas. Encouragement, we looked at documenting popular loop routes. I've actually done some of this work for Franklin County in the past, and it's something that we could do for other rural localities, such as turn-by-turn sheets and mapping that is designed for cyclists to use when they are out. And then developing an interactive map of bicycle facilities and comfort levels is kind of like a wish project that we would like to look at in the future. That could be a really great resource for people coming into the region and wanting to figure out where they can cycle safely. For enforcement, the only thing that we came up with really was enforcing the Virginia's 3-foot passing law. Obviously, we can't do that ourselves, so that would be a partnering with law enforcement for that. Evaluation and planning, we wanted to improve off-road planning for rural cycling infrastructure. Many of the localities covered in this plan, Craig, Alleghany, Covington, and Clifton Forge, are not included in the Greenway Commission, which has a whole Greenway and Trails plan, right, that we just, you guys would have been involved with briefly in 2018, and that the Greenway Commission adopts, but we don't have anything like that really in those localities. I think Clifton Forge has their own bike ped plan, but we don't have that comprehensive regional vision. So improving some of that planning would be really helpful, I think. And improving statewide planning data for all identified routes. And this is important because as we get into the next section, I'll talk a little bit about this, but VDOT does collect planning data for all of their roadways that they maintain, and all of the roadways in this study area are maintained by VDOT. So they were a key partner in putting this plan together, and we want to help them improve that data and hope, because there are places where that data is missing. Incorporating rural bikeway routes into urban bikeway plans. We're going to be updating the urban bikeway plan this year, so that's a timely recommendation. Inviting rural staff to the Regional Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee that meets out of the Regional Commission, and then improving public input in the rural area for future rural plan updates, such as the long-range transportation plan, and defining rural multimodal centers. There are some that are already identified by the state, but there are others that are potential places that we want to make sure that we're doing that kind of cross-checking at a local level. Okay, so the big thing that is the same, or not the same, and that some of the recommendations have changed, but that follows the framework from the last plan, is infrastructure recommendations. So if you have read the 2006 Rural Bikeway Plan, the focus is really on what routes do we want people to be cycling on, and do we see the need for improvements on, right? And so we took that and we built on it. We had staff look at the routes and determine which ones they wanted to keep and which ones they wanted to go away. They didn't really want any of them to go away, and they added several. So, and then we took that back out to the public, and they added some input on that. And then we looked at that statewide planning data, which is a new thing we have since the previous plan, and we developed kind of a methodology and a framework, and you can see that. It's in the appendix for the Rural Bikeway Plan if you want to look at it. It goes into detail. I won't go into too much detail here today, but essentially we came up with what we thought, according to VDOT and FHWA guidance, would be the best the infrastructure improvement for safety for cyclists. And so we recognize that, of course, planning data can be updated and changed, and that ultimately VDOT houses all of the infrastructure improvements that they will make. But we hope that they'll consider some of these recommendations when they look at making changes on the roadways. So we will be adding, following action by the commission today, we'll be adding these routes and this information to our interactive bike ped map online. The PDF, of course, you have a copy of, but and in the plan, each of the recommendations is broken out into a table as well by locality. So you can easily see what has been recommended for your locality. And that's what's up with those recommendations. So thank you to everybody who served on the steering committee and all the staff folks and VDOT, and of course Liz with the Greenway Commission. If you have any questions, Rachel and I were the two primary staff people on this program or project, and I just want to take a moment to recognize Rachel's hard work on this because she did a great job.
You guys put a lot of work in this.
I'm sorry, Bill, go right ahead.
That's all right. I was just going to say it. You can tell they put a lot of hard work in this.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's a very thorough plan. A lot of good information there, Amanda. Thank you for that. So this afternoon, Commission, we need to consider approval of the 2020 Rural Bikeway Plan. First of all, are there any questions for Amanda? If not, we will entertain a motion for approval of the plan as presented.
Approval.
All right. Did I hear a second?
Second, Van Orsdal.
Okay, great. Thank you. Wayne, if you would call the roll, please, sir.
Ms. Van Orsdal.
Yes.
Mr. Clinton. Mr. Clinton? Mr. Martin?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whitlow?
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
Yes.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Osborne?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Mr. Bestfitch?
Yes.
Dr. Downey?
Yes.
I think Mr. Cobb has left the the Zoom meeting. Mr. Gessler?
Yes.
Mr. Velozin?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Saunders? Mr. Saunders? Ms. Moeller?
Yes.
Mr. Irvin? Mr. Irvin?
Mr. Irvin just jumped off, but he wanted to indicate in the affirmative.
Okay. Mr. Gross?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
The motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Mr.
All
Strickland, this is Steve Clinton. If you would add me as a yes to that as well.
Okay. Yes.
Great. Great. Thank you, folks, very much. And with that, we'll move on to the 2020 Roanoke Valley Local Flood Plan. Amanda, I think you're up again.
I am. I'm up again.
Yeah.
Let me get this shared to you guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Maybe. There we go. All right. Can everybody see it okay?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. All right. So concurrently with the Rural Bikeway Plan, I was also working on the Roanoke Valley Local Food Plan. So this plan actually covers Craig County, Botetourt County, Roanoke City, the city of Salem, the town of Benton, Franklin County, and Rocky Mount. So that is the study area that we were looking at. We started work on this again in 2018. First steering committee meeting was held in August, and we collected data throughout 2019 and drafted in spring of 2020. So exactly paralleling the process. This is the steering committee that worked on the bikeway plan. As you can see, on the bikeway plan, on the local food plan, as you can see, we had Healthy Roanoke Valley and LEAP and the Virginia Cooperative Extension involved in this document. So what kind of information did we collect? We used a lot of existing USDA and different documents that have been put together by our stakeholder partners. And then we built on that information. So we did a lot of public outreach for this document. We did a consumer survey that used a question was designed to interface with the community health assessment that for Roanoke Valley and Franklin. So it used one of the questions there about where people got their food so that we could kind of compare what populations we were hitting. And then we expanded a little bit on that question to get an idea of what consumer challenges were for food. We did a farmer survey, which was designed to build on the farmer listening sessions that we assisted LEAP with back in 2016 that LEAP conducted. And then we did stakeholder interviews. I actually had an intern who helped me with all of this at the time in 2019. Her name was Coley Tuzel from Virginia Tech. And we developed a list of about 10 questions for several stakeholders that were put together. The list of stakeholders was put together by the steering committee, and she went out and interviewed all of them and put together a report. You can find it in the appendix of the document. So if you're curious about what some of the takeaways were from that. But all of this information fed into our recommendations for this document. We used a whole measures for community food systems model here to kind of come up with recommendations. And so this framework has 6 categories. They are justice and fairness, strong communities, vibrant farms, healthy people, sustainable ecosystems, and thriving local economies. And you'll see that there's a lot of repetition between those categories because food work is so interconnected. It's really hard to kind of like cleanly separate stuff out, right? It's hard to cleanly separate food access and food production because they're related. If we have problems with the supply chain, then it affects whether or not people can afford the food that's on the grocery store shelves, right? Or if there is food on the grocery store shelves, as we saw in March. So we found with our recommendations to the steering committee several themes. I'm not going to go into every single recommendation, but I'm going to do a summary slide of kind of the big takeaways from the recommendations at the end of this, but I did want to talk about the themes themselves. So for justice and fairness, some of the big themes that we heard were improving knowledge of food access issues. Specifically, we know USDA produces food access data, but we haven't really done a region-wide analysis of that data. I've done one for the city of Roanoke in the past, but haven't done it for the rest of the localities. We also know that some of that data is really spotty, so we'd love to see that improved. Food access in local governments, so making sure that local governments are actively thinking about food access in their policy, including looking at comprehensive plans and zoning ordinances and seeing if that's addressed in those documents. And then food access is an economic issue, so recognizing the link between income and hunger in our region. Improving regional efforts, so making sure that we are bringing everybody to the table and that people are talking to each other instead of competing with each other. Supporting and broadening existing programs, so making sure we're building on those programs. Collecting better data about our regional farms. The USDA collects a lot of data, but again, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of it's very spotty. It's collected at the federal level. And so we have a lot of room to improve that data more locally. Keeping farmland for farm use, support and expand existing farm-focused programs. Getting food to consumers and centering our regional farm identity. One of the big things that came up in conversations with the steering committee is how important, when we talk about marketing our region for tourism and different things, one of the big things that comes up is scenic views. Well, those scenic views are made possible by our farms, right? Like that's a key part of our regional identity. And so how do we work to preserve that in specific spaces? Supporting marginalized communities, continuing emphasizing education and outreach. This repeats some of the stuff from the food access section as well. Improving regional data on ecological benefits and burdens of local farming. One of the things that you're going to hear me talk about in our next presentation is water quality. And that's been a big conversation that we're having statewide in terms of what water quality impacts farming has on our rivers and streams. So we have all this statewide data again about costs, about impacts, but sometimes that changes depending on what watershed you're in and what situation you're in. So maybe building on some of that information with our partners would be helpful. And then supporting research and education about alternative and adaptive agriculture. I was on a really great farm tour last year where the farmer was talking about how this was in Botetourt. If you'll remember last year, we had so many days of plus 90-degree weather. Well, the grass doesn't grow if it's over 90 degrees. So how is the farmer feeding their cows? And that farmer was talking about the grass that they had imported that would grow in those conditions in some of their fields. And so that kind of adaptation, some of that work is already being done by the Virginia Cooperative Extension. So it's really just supporting that work. And then planning for food waste. So this is the other side of the supply chain. After production, you get to like, what do you do with your food? And that's something that we can look at. Are there better ways to handle food waste in our region? So summarizing, the recommendations. I'm sorry, Mr. Gross, did you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So summarizing the recommendations in terms of like what the regional commission can do, we can look at some of these projects in the future. A regional food access assessment, advocating for improved USDA food access data, reviewing local government zoning codes and comprehensive plans, integrating food access into regional and local transportation planning, supporting establishing a regional food system council or committee that would have everybody together talking about these issues, and supporting existing programs and farms and marketing those farms, and then assisting with the development of a regional agriculture census. We're probably not the best organization to like house that, but we can definitely help provide data. And then producing case study reports to assess compost program feasibility for food waste. So those are some of the things that we can look at going forward and some of the big takeaways from the recommendations. So next steps for this project is to kind of look at those and start prioritizing and maybe incorporate some of these projects in our future work programs. And then the Regional Commission is already working with partners to provide letters of support where they are already starting to implement some of these things. So that's kind of where we are with it, just outside of the plan, but just to keep you informed of how we're already sort of looking at implementation options. Any questions on this?
I'm good. Okay, Amanda, thank you very much for another very informative bit of information there. Commission, you have before you the Roanoke Valley Local Food Plan. We certainly want to consider adoption of that plan this afternoon. First of all, are there any questions or comments? If not, we will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved, Van Orsdal.
All right, we have a motion. Was there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. So, Wayne, if you would, one more time, please, sir.
Ms. Van Orsdal,
Yes.
Mr. Clinton,
Yes.
Mr. Martin,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Whitlow,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Radford,
Yes.
Mr. North, Mr. North.
Unmute, Phil.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Osborne,
Yes.
Mr. Tucker,
Yes.
Mr. Bestpitch,
Yes.
Dr. Downey,
Yes.
Mr. Gusler,
Yes.
Mr. Velozen,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Mr. Saunders, Mr. Saunders. Okay. Ms. Moeller,
Yes.
Mr. Irvin. I think he had to leave. Mr. Gross,
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
The motion passes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, sir, and thank you, commissioners. Okay, Amanda, if your voice holds out, looks like you can go for the hat trick this afternoon.
I know, one more time.
Yeah, one more
Okay.
time.
This one should be a little bit shorter.
Okay.
All right, so as you all know, we work on Chesapeake Bay implementation work in partnership with DEQ. That's been going on for the past year or so. And so we are contractually required to give you an update every year, every contract period, and now is the time. The time is now. So here we are. So for a recap for folks who maybe need a refresher, the Phase 3 Watershed Improvement Program the final draft was released in August of 2019. This is a product of DEQ. It's a statewide watershed improvement plan that provides a summary of how Virginia will help meet the Chesapeake Bay 2025 TMDL milestones, which are of course, prescribed by the EPA and are federally overseen. Virginia is currently on track to meet reductions, and so they have previously focused a lot of their efforts on wastewater and combined sewer, so point source issues with water quality, but now they are looking at non-point source. So they're looking at agriculture, urban and suburban polluted runoff, and septic. In our region, all of our work is outside of what we call regulated stormwater areas, or MS4 areas. So folks who work for the city in Salem and Roanoke County will be familiar with that stormwater work. So this is in unregulated areas. We're looking at trying to implement some of the same kinds of BMPs and programs on the ground. So that's generally a summary of this effort statewide. So one of the things that I wanted to mention in this update, and I know this is going to just look like Greek to you guys, but it's just here because that's what DEQ showed us. So you can experience my bafflement, right? So one of the things I wanted to let you guys know about is that they are changing the state level allocations for load reductions, nutrient load reductions. This is really just kind of an FYI for the board because it should not impact anything that our region is hoping to accomplish, and all of the WIP phase 3 modeling that DEQ did will stay the same, because they had previously, there's two reasons for that. One is because they had previously included climate change in their framework for when they were doing the evaluation for nutrient load reduction. And so the federal requirement to now include climate change doesn't impact us because we already did it, right? But then also Virginia was in a pretty good place and had kind of buffered a little bit in our planning. And so with the way they have reallocated everything, it's not going to impact us. But it's good to know about. So an overview of our piece of this work as opposed to the statewide piece of this work. We had gotten a contract to continue the phase 3 WIP work. This is our first full year contract that we've gotten from DEQ, and we're wrapping that up over the next couple of months. So we're in our third quarter of that contract now, or we'll be moving into our fourth quarter. So the deliverables were built on past efforts and opportunities that were identified by Bay PDC. So there were 16 total contract deliverables, 10 were required and 6 were optional. We got to pick which ones we thought we were suited to do because we're obviously not in the same place as the East Coast, right? They are giving us $52,000. The PDC provides a local match of $13,000 to match that. So this year, what did we do? Well, one of the big things that we did is we hired a new person. Some of you have probably tentatively met Gabriel. In better times, we would have had him in the room and had him stand up and read his bio, right? But he is our dedicated Chesapeake Bay person. He actually had a float that he had to do today to meet one of our contractual requirements. And so that's one of the reasons that I'm covering the presentation today. We did Earth Day Online University, which was a virtual event. It was hosted by Ride Solutions, where we did a video recording about BMP education for folks. We did Chesapeake Bay Awareness Week, where we did kind of a social media campaign in conjunction with Visit Virginia's Blue Ridge and some other folks to get the word out about how a lot of our tourism assets, like the James River, the Cowpasture River, the Jackson River, those assets are directly impacted by water quality, of course. And so we wanted to tell people how they could work to improve water quality. And then the Farm and Float, which ended up being today, unfortunately, which was an education event where we talked with folks about agricultural BMPs. So the Upper James Resource Conservation and Development Council is a nonprofit organization that is working in the area. It's a very, very tiny nonprofit. And so we did an evaluation with them to figure out how they could maybe expand some of their programs, or we could work with them to build on their programs. And then we've, of course, been continuing to have stakeholder meetings, and we've begun work on some smaller on-the-ground implementation projects to start meeting those WIP 3 goals. I'm working with Chad Williams at Alleghany County to get some trees planted along the Jackson River Trail. And then also working with, Gabriel is working with the Eagle Rock Library and the Soil and Water Conservation District, Mountain Castle Soil and Water Conservation District, to look at maybe putting in a rain garden at the library, which would be a great educational asset for kids coming in and out of the library. So what are we going to do next? We're in the process of submitting some different project ideas to DEQ to be included in the scope of work for next year. We do not expect any changes in funding for next year, which is great. A lot of funding was up in the air, as you know, over the spring and summer, but our funding is still secure for this project, at least at the state level. And so we want to continue to work on the outreach and promotion, and also work with partners to work on our implementation projects and get those to a good place. And then maybe start looking at improving septic tank pump out reporting, or improved septic tank pump out program for some of these areas in partnership with with our wastewater facilities and locality staff. So we're still working on exactly what next year looks like, but there's a lot of great ideas and there's a lot of things that need to be done. So we're not worried about having stuff to do. And again, Gabriel is kind of the guy on the ground on this, and I am the idea person, apparently. That's how we've broken it out. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact either of us.
What is the issue you're talking about on the septic tanks?
Yeah.
They want to start inspecting all that. I'd have a problem with that if they came out at my house.
So it's not really an inspection thing, Mr. Martin. It's so right now, if we could, when someone pumps out their septic tank, a private company a lot of times is the one who does it, right? And then they take it and they dump it at maybe the water authority's wastewater treatment facility, as an example. So when that happens, a lot of the records right now are paper records, and so they're not necessarily getting reported up to DEQ, and we could get credit for that as a region in terms of meeting our water quality goals if we were doing that extra step of reporting. So it's really more of there's a breakdown between what's actually happening and what's getting reported, and we don't want to leave anything on the table with that, because we don't want to get to the point where they're regulating us.
So you're just saying they won't.
Hello, this is David.
The number of septic tanks that's been pumped, that's all they ask for, just a number?
Yeah, we don't have any idea of what that number is right now. So the water authority may have some idea of what that number is, or whatever. If you're in Craig, it would be the Public Service Authority. If you're in Alleghany, it's going to be a different organization. But that there's a disconnect between that data being communicated. So it's really patching that disconnect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Amanda. Any other questions for Amanda this afternoon? Well, thank you, Amanda, and congratulations. Your voice made it through all three presentations. Good job. Good job.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. All right. Is there any other business to come before the commission this afternoon? All right. We'll open up the floor for comments. Do any commission members have any comments this afternoon? Okay. Well, folks, thank you very much for a very productive meeting, and the only comment I'd like to make just briefly is to once again thank our staff. Obviously, COVID-19 has changed a lot of things and maybe slowed down work in some areas. But our staff continues to work hard, and that's very obvious by some of the reports we heard this afternoon. So thank you, staff, for continuing to do a great job. We appreciate that so much. If there are no other comments, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, motion to adjourn, sir.
Second.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the second. Billy, be careful driving home. All in favor of the motion, please signify by turning off your computers. Thanks, folks.
Good one.
Now Billy's going to drive somewhere. Where are you going, Billy?